Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Natalie Holbrook and I am a professional astrologer and also a business and sales coach. And today we are going to be talking about something that I wish that I would have had almost 10 years ago. I'm aging myself here for my Saturn return. So we are going to be talking about my story of how was my Saturn return, what did I learn for it, and how can this support you if you are going through your Saturn return, or if you know somebody who is, maybe your kid or your partner. The Saturn return is a really difficult time, but it's also the time that brings us mastery, and it brings us this level of maturity and discipline, and it sets us up for the next essentially 30 years of our lives. So before we do get into it, I do want to also just mention that if you want to pull your chart, you can go down to the link below. You'll be able to learn where your Saturn is, what sign it's in, what house it's in, and that's going to be able to set you off. So let's get into it. So before we discuss my experience with my Saturn return, we first have to talk about, well, what the heck is Saturn? So, Saturn in the galaxy, it looks like this. It has the rings around it. And, it's interesting because I've done some research on the planet of Saturn, and Saturn is actually very cold. It's icy. And so we can always take these descriptions of what the planet actually looks and feels like into how it's going to resonate with us on this spiritual, psychological level. Astrology is so crazy, right? So if we think about Saturn being this icy cold planet, it actually can be icy cold for us in terms of like, ow, this maybe is like burning me or stinging me, or it's something that is forcing me to essentially master. It's essentially forcing me to become better because I am placed with these things that are difficult and that are hard and that are a challenge. Think about cold plunging is something that is all the rage today. A cold plunge is something that you master and it's a challenge. And, then when you get out, you're like, woo, I did it. 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you did. That is what is so exciting. So that is the energy of Saturn, is that Saturn is not just here to make you depressed or, be this big scary thing. I personally love Saturn. He's one of my favorite planets. I was personally born on a Saturday and Saturn day. Okay, that's like if you were born on a Saturday, or if you love Saturday, you probably have some Saturnian type of influence in your life. And it forces you to do the difficult things so that then you can be the master. So again, where we have Saturn is going to show us the areas where we need to have that sense of dedication, of devotion, of commitment. This is what Saturn is asking of you. Saturn is coming into your life and it is saying you only have this many years to live. What are you going to do with your one precious life? What are you going to do with your career, with your relationships, with your children, with your health? Saturn comes in so that we can actually come back into realignment, so that we can be on the right path. There's a saying that Saturn does not necessarily deny, but what Saturn does is it delays. So Saturn is the ruler of time. It's the Lord of time. And it is all about us working hard, working smart. And when we do these things, it will pay off over time. It rules legacy. It rules generations. It rules your ancestors and where you came from, the traditions that you came from. Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. And so, Capricorn energy naturally has this. This is why Capricorns are so focused on working. And a lot of them, it's not just working for the sake of working. They're working because of one word. What is that one word? It's one of my favorite words because I have a lot of 10th house energy. So if you also have a lot of 10th house energy, that means you have underlying Capricorn energy. That one word is legacy. Saturn says, what is your legacy? What are you doing with this brilliant time that your soul said, yes, I'm going to come here on earth and live, right? So Saturn also does sometimes make us feel depressed. It can make us feel tired. It can bring up issues in health, in relationships, in career, in finances, because it says your soul wanted to come down here and master this particular area of life whatever you're going through, and specifically what house it's in for you and what sign it's in for you. And here is where we are going to set you off onto the path so that you can be dedicated, you can be committed, you can step into mastery, step into legacy. And the thing too is Saturn actually wants you to be in enjoyment, but it's just saying work through it so that you can harness the wisdom and the knowledge of being able to then become the teacher, the guru, the person who is building something bigger than themselves. It's really about, can you get out of your own way, maybe in your emotions or whatever limitations are there, and learn to break free of those things. So who's excited for their Saturn return with all of that being said? Okay, now I want to tell you guys all about my journey. Now here's the thing. Most astrologers will say your Saturn return is exact when you are either 29 or 30. However, my personal experience and what I've seen with my hundreds of clients is that it really kind of has this like sweet spot where it's almost, I'm gonna say this, it's kind of like a 6-year initiation that you are in. So when Saturn does return, this is what kicks off the Saturn return, right? It's kind of obvious. However, the reason that I say that we feel this from 27 to 33, 6 years, is because Saturn is beginning to inch up to where it was that moment that you were born. And we start to feel the effects of this, especially depending on what else is happening in your chart. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you guys my story, and my mission in this is that hopefully somehow this can support you as you're going through your Saturn return, that maybe what I experienced is similar to what you're experiencing, because I know that when we hear the stories of others and we know that we come out on the other side and we come out better and smarter and healthier and brighter and in the glow up, then it's really promising, because I know that if you are going through a hard time, you are going to get through this, because I was going through a very difficult time too, and I got through it and am a completely different person, and I'm so grateful for all of the lessons that the Saturn return taught me. Okay, so when I was 27 years old, I was traveling around the world. I was living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I knew that I was going to come back to the Bay Area, California, which is where I grew up. And I had gone through a very difficult health issue within my gut. I had something called a fissure. I had all of these issues where it really changed my lifestyle. And this happened when I was about 25 years old. And I was living in Las Vegas at that time. I was working in nightlife. I was a really big party girl. I was actually working as a journalist for a very prominent magazine there. And I was interviewing all of these famous DJs and hanging out with them and up till 5 in the morning. And when I was 25, the universe was like, nope, you are done. And I began to have all of these health issues. And so that led me into the kickoff of my Saturn return when I was about 27. So I had really had to understand my body. And it's very normal that when we enter into our Saturn return, that health issues will arise, so that you can really step into learning your body, that you can learn what is it that you work best with, what do you need to avoid. And so I went on this journey after I began healing my health issues, where I was traveling around the world. I was living in South America, and when I turned 27, I was living in Buenos Aires. And I had this vision. I was like, I'm gonna move back to the Bay Area. I'm gonna study nutrition. I'm gonna become a holistic nutritionist. I'm gonna help other people to heal with their gut issues the way that I healed with mine. And I'm going to do this. This is the vision. So I did that. I got back. I enrolled in a really great school in Berkeley, California, and it was wonderful. I was loving it. I was like, this is the path, this is the thing. Finally, I have found my purpose. So if you're someone like me, then you've probably always been wondering, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Maybe even a little existential about this. And so when I knew that I was going to do nutrition, I was just like, yes, this is it finally. So while I was back to school studying nutrition, on the side, I was working part-time in different brand ambassador and field marketing jobs. And while I was there, I met one of my best friends to this day. And that's another thing about the Saturn return, is that you will actually, there's kind of 3 different types of relationship things that will come up. One is that you will meet people who will stay in your life time and time over, whether this is friends, partners, family members, maybe strengthen their ties there. You will also lose people during this time, absolutely, because you're growing up. And thirdly is that you will also have people who come into your life who teach you very important lessons. So, side note on all of that, okay? So I met this friend, and it was around New Year's. It was like the end of the year. And we both were like, what are you gonna do for New Year's? And she was like, well, I kind of want to go to India on this meditation trip. And I was like, let's go. And we both were in our travel era. So we raised money. We went with a really great organization that has an ashram down in Bangalore. So we go down to this ashram, we raised money for them, we campaigned, we gave them, I think we raised $2,500 or something, doesn't really matter. And we get down there, and every single morning we were in deep meditation, we were in deep yoga, and for part of the trip we were doing 3 days of silence. During those 3 days of silence, I kept hearing this voice over and over in my head, and honestly, it was the most annoying voice, because you know what this voice was saying? This voice was saying, leave nutrition, move to San Francisco, and work in tech. And I was like, what? You want me to work in tech? No way. I just found my purpose. I just found what I'm doing. I am so amped on all of this. And I kept hearing it over and over and over again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. And I told my friend, I was like, this is so weird. I'm so annoyed right now because I'm in school for nutrition. Why would I do this, right? So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna trust this and see what happens and go back to school and whatever. So I come back home after the trip. I go into school, and something shifted within me, you guys. It was like something shifted where all of a sudden I couldn't get into my schoolwork. I was like, I don't really want to do this right now. And I was like really daydreaming about the possibility of what could happen if I did actually move into San Francisco. What would happen if I did actually work in tech? And what I was realizing was that with the nutrition program that I was in, there wasn't necessarily a pathway. It wasn't like, okay, you do this program and then you get a job here, or you do this program and then you start a business. And I had 0 business experience at that point in my life. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep going with this and see what happens. And suddenly something hit me where it was like, nope, you need to move in, you're doing this. And I was like, okay, universe. So before the next semester started, I withdrew. I said, if it's meant to be, then I will come back. And I moved into San Francisco, and I looked for jobs in tech. Now, some people might be like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. You're in school, what are you doing? But you guys, you have to follow your intuition, because me moving into San Francisco and eventually working in tech, this is what my Saturn return was literally all about. So I moved into SF, I got an apartment, and it took me a really long time to find a job. And when I finally found a job, it was through a recruiting agency. And at that point I was like, I will do anything. I don't know what you want me to do, God, but I will do it, whatever I'm supposed to do. So I got a job working as an executive assistant for a well-known startup company. And I was the EA, the executive assistant to the founder of the company. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna work with the founder. This is amazing. By the way, I'm a Leo rising. I will just tell you right now, Leo risings are not executive assistants, okay? Maybe there's a few if you have a lot of Virgo or Capricorn in your chart, but I do not. I have a Gemini moon and a Taurus sun, and I have a lot of Gemini energy. There's a lot of creativity there. There's a lot of bright, fun, I am just not an EA. This experience taught me that because it was so difficult for me. It was so hard. I felt like this. I felt like a speck all of the time. It was kind of like the Devil Wears Prada, where I was constantly in trouble. I was constantly messing up. I was not an organized person. So for me to then have to organize someone else's schedule and to organize someone else's life and to be on top of it, this was like not my bread and butter. And I remember that walking in every single day just felt so heavy, where I literally just felt like, what am I doing? Why am I here? This is so wrong. And I was really upset. I was like, why did I leave nutrition? Why am I doing this? But the silver lining was that I was making some really amazing connections, and I was learning essentially how to work, because all of the jobs that I had had leading up to that were these fun jobs, or these things that I didn't necessarily take that seriously. Where all of a sudden, being in San Francisco, working in a company that was a multi-million-dollar company, and that I was in this high position to work with the executive, to work with the founder, all of a sudden I had this pressure on me of like, you need to perform, you need to do this. And this was Saturn coming in and showing me where I hadn't ever been before and where I could go, what the possibilities were. To be honest, every day, even though it was very difficult for me, I was so inspired. I was so inspired to see, wow, this is possible, to create a company, to create a huge impact, to create a mission, and to really work together as a team. So also my Saturn is in Sagittarius. And so that means that I'm personally here to learn the deep lessons of learning, of travel, of doing things on a big scale. So wherever you have your Saturn is teaching you where you are here to master that energy. So this was actually a very Sagittarius type of environment that I was in, because it was all about giving back. It was about being generous. It was about travel. It was about making people's dreams come true. And that's very much tied to the Sagittarius energy. So during that time, I remember that there were so many times that I felt like I was messing up. I was literally working 12-hour days all of the time. So it was a lot of work hard, expectations, discipline, prove yourself, mature, come into age. And I did. And so I did all of those things. And to be honest, after 3 months, I was done. My contract with the recruiting agency and with the company, they were like, yeah, we're not going to keep going on her. And I was like, phew, yes, I'm not going to continue. And it took me a while to find another job again. And in between, I was doing these promotional jobs, the brand ambassador jobs, and I actually really enjoyed those. And it was nice because it gave me a schedule of I had to be somewhere. And Saturn wants you to have structure. Saturn wants you to be on a schedule. Now, it was also during this time that I went on my first ever yoga retreat. Now, this was back in 2015. So yoga retreats and all of this were not the rage like they are today. So it was very important for me, because that was what also became a catalyst for me being a person who now hosts retreats and hosts events and does things like this. So during our Saturn return, we will have different experiences come up that will potentially motivate us to do more of our calling in the midst of our lifetime. So then I got another job. And during this job, I was working again for a startup in San Francisco, and I took a job in sales. Now, this was actually one of the most life-changing roles of, my time, and especially my time up to then, because I really learned and mastered my craft in sales. I started out at the very bottom, which was called an SDR, a sales development representative. And within about 3 months, I was recruited to host this event that some other colleagues and I planned, where we had this idea of, hey, why don't we turn our sales into an outside sales type of job and go down to Southern California and LA and sign people up and just do this new innovative thing. And it was really cool. And this is something that I want to emphasize for you guys, is that when you have an idea during your Saturn return, do it and commit to it. Because the ideas that you have, the things that come into your mind during your Saturn return, are there for a reason. They're there to actually support you in what is possible. And so if you can either get, funding, or you get backing, or you get support by whoever you're working with, or you get other people in the community involved, it's going to give you that ability to be a leader and to show your leadership skills. And so what this did for me is that it showed me how I could be a leader within working with this company and say, hey, I'm going to organize this thing. We're going to essentially create a mini outside sales team and go see how this works. And so it was really cool because it actually was successful, and it wasn't successful enough for us to always have, this type of experience going on. But what it did is that it caught the eye of someone else who was at the company and said, hey, we want you to become the field marketing manager. And that was at the time my dream job. That is what I wanted to do. That was actually why I worked with the original company in the beginning, because I was like, I just want to learn marketing. I want to learn events. I want to, I kind of already knew events because I was hosting them before, but I really want to get paid for doing this. I want this to be my thing. And so because I had worked so hard and I had shown myself and I had proved myself, I had proven my talents and my gifts, then they saw that. So the Saturn return is a time that when you are actually living up to what you want to do, then people will see that and they will come in and they will notice and they will give you opportunities. But the opportunities you really do have to work at and work for. So within this, I had the field marketing role. It was incredible. And then a few months later, right? Was it a few months? Yeah, it was about 6 months later. They said, we actually don't have space for this role anymore, and we want you to just come back into the sales team. And so when I did that, I was really sad, and I actually sabotaged myself. I did something that you're not supposed to do in sales. It ended up in me getting let go of the company. And so I got fired, you guys. I got fired, and I was so sad because I had given my all to this company for nearly 2 years. I had so many friends in the company. I felt like I was a really intrinsic part of the vision and of what this was. And it took me a minute, but what it ultimately did is it brought me back into my journey of myself again. And I said, you know what? I'm actually serious now. Now that I came in, and for the last 2.5 years, I've been working and getting all of this experience within business, within sales, within how companies run. Now I can start my own company. So that is why that little voice in my head while I was meditating told me, go to San Francisco, work in tech, because now looking back almost 10 years later, this is what gave me the experience that I needed to now be who and where I am today. So just know that as you're moving through your Saturn return, you are going to be learning lessons that are setting you up for your future. They're setting you up for who you're meant to be, for who you're meant to know, and for what you're known as and what you're creating in this world. So after that whole experience, I went back to school. I actually enrolled at IIN, the Institute of Integrated Nutrition, and became a health coach. And I kept coming back to this place of nutrition. For all of my fellow astrology nerds, I have my Mars and Capricorn in the 6th house. So there is a lot of health and wellness that really lights me up, and that is forever a part of my journey. And so I went back to school again, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go get a master's in nutrition, and I'm going to do this the right way, is what I was thinking. So I go back to school. I moved down to Southern California. I moved to LA. I was living in Santa Monica, and I was doing prereqs, and I was literally, I think I'm 32 at this point, and I was dissecting frogs with like 22-year-olds, and I kept being like, what is my life? Like, there was still something that just felt a little bit off, and I didn't know. And then everything changed one day. It was in February. It was the end of February. It was Pisces season. I was walking on the beach in Malibu, and I was listening to a podcast all about astrology. And in this podcast, they were saying, if you have Pisces energy, then you have to experience some level of loneliness in your lifetime, because Pisces is all about oneness. And so we have to experience the opposite of that, which is separation. And when I heard that, I started crying, because while I was in school, while I was going back, I was so confused. I was so lonely. I felt this very existential, almost, why am I here? Do I even want to live anymore? Like, it was a really, really difficult time, because I was just feeling this heaviness and this weight. So even though I felt like, yes, there's something that I'm on the right track with, it still was very, very confusing. And I think that is something that we must always recognize with the Saturn return, is that it can be a really confusing time for us. So as I listened to this podcast and they said this about the Pisces energy, I didn't really know anything about astrology back then. I had had one reading ever in my life where the reader told me my big three, and we really only talked about that. And that to me was really amazing. However, I didn't ever take the time to dive deeper into it until this day, until this podcast. And I'm so grateful for the astrologer who was talking about all of this because it literally changed my life. So I ran home. I said, where is Pisces in my chart? How do I find this out? Turned out that I had Jupiter in Pisces. And the reason that I tell you guys this is because, again, this all circles back to knowing that Saturn, during your Saturn return, you are going to have these experiences that then set you off on your next path. And I really do think strongly that the Saturn return energy is from 27 to 33, because then when we hit 33, we enter into our Christ year, where we're coming deeper into ourselves and into why we're actually here, into the legacy that we're here for. So with understanding all of that with the astrology, I then became hooked. I was like, okay, my Jupiter's in Pisces. I know that I'm here for oneness. I know that I've had to deal with isolation and loneliness and very existential thoughts, suicide ideation my entire life. And this explains it all. I need to learn astrology. And so it was after that, it was once I turned 33, it was when I kind of had this aha moment of, okay, this is it. And that was really the kind of work era of my Saturn return, is that it took me into this place of learning, here's what you think you're going to do, here's the skills that you need to learn, and here's where you're going to come out. And now I combine astrology with sales and with business. And so I bring all of that in with mindfulness, with wellness, because, mindset is everything. I'm not necessarily teaching people about food and what they should eat and, gut health and all of that anymore. However, everything from my Saturn return taught me to be the person that I am here and now. So that was my work. Now I just want to also tell you guys that another huge component of this is your health. So I kind of began, going into my Saturn return with these health issues. I already had this awareness from having that issue with, my gut. And then while I was working for these companies in San Francisco, I was actually so stressed out all of the time that I developed something called SIBO. It's small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And man, it was hard. And this was back in 2016. So we didn't have Instagram to the, extent that it's at now, where you could just search for, whatever it is and other people are talking about it and all of that. And I had to go to about 12 different healing professionals. I remember I went to so many acupuncturists, Reiki healers, Western medical doctors, GI specialists. And finally, as I was doing so much research online, I was like, this is what I have. I have this thing, SIBO. I know it. And I found an incredible holistic nutritionist in San Francisco. And it was about 2 months of me searching. This is what Saturn wants you to do. It wants you to search and to find the problem so that then you can find the solution. And it's going to say, how committed are you to feeling good? How committed are you to being your best, to knowing that you can thrive, to changing your lifestyle? And I was like, I am all in because I cannot live with this anymore. And I remember that an acupuncturist once told me, he was like, the top people that we see who come to us are the ones who have gut issues. And it's because the gut issues literally are so horrible and painful to live with that you have to go in and do something to change. And if we think about it on a spiritual metaphysical level, the gut is our second brain, right? The gut is our gut intuition, our gut knowing, our gut feeling. I just know this thing, like my gut's telling me to do this. It's because there's some type of shift in your lifestyle. So if you have any type of gut issues, this is going to really be something that it's like your soul is telling you, hey, there's something that we need to shift there. You're not listening to your intuition. And for me, it's always been through the gut. So finally, I found this nutritionist. We were able to heal my SIBO, and it was just really amazing to work with her and to know that there are people out there. And so if you are experiencing any health issues, please know that when you're going through your Saturn return, this is actually normal. really, use Louise Hay has an incredible book called You Can Heal Your Body. Look into that book, look into what does this mean on a deeper level for me? Why am I going through this? And put it out there to the universe, to God. I am ready. I'm available to be healed. I'm ready to do the emotional work, the subconscious work, because so much of this is these patterns and these thought loops and these things that we're stuck in that are living in our subconscious that are then creating dis-ease in the body. Same thing with if you have weight to lose, it's because there are emotions that you haven't processed, that you haven't looked at. So that is where my health journey was during my Saturn return. And it kind of kept coming up. It wasn't that the SIBO was coming back all of the time, but I really had to look at what am I eating? What is my stress level? How am I working out? What am I doing for my body? And I will say that I definitely was working out too hard. I was going to Soul Cycle, to Barry's Bootcamp. I was going to all of these workouts that were just too much on my body. And now, almost 10 years later, I look back and I say, I just needed to eat more protein. I just needed to drink more water. I needed to sleep. I needed to stress less. I needed to eat more vegetables. It's kind of all of the things that we know we should do. But once you start eating that protein, once you start looking at what actually works for my body, because everybody is bio-individual, we're all different, that is when things are going to shift and change for you. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in the Saturn return, because this is a huge one, is relationships. So like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, there's really 3 people who are going to come into your life during the Saturn return. You are going to have people who are going to be there and they're going to stay forever. You are going to have people who are going to maybe have been in your life before and they're going to fall off. And you're going to have people who are going to come in and completely disrupt your life and cause you chaos and cause you pain and, really rile you up and give you that story, right? And I had all 3. I met so many of my dearest best friends who to this day I'm so fortunate to hold tightly in my circle. I had people who fell off who I thought were going to be my best friends for my entire life. And lastly, I had people come in who completely shifted me forever. And one of those people is someone who, I could call my twin flame, who I could call the person that really kind of shifted the way that I looked at relationships and who was a mirror to me. Now, if we talk about the twin flame, what that really is, I personally don't think that we should be with our twin flames. Some people are like, yes, be with your twin flame and you're going to constantly be triggered and constantly be growing and evolving. And if that is your journey, that's so beautiful. For me, that was not my journey. My journey was that this twin flame person was someone that I feel like I've had a very karmic past with and came in and really actually propelled me in so many ways, in ways that were really challenging and also in ways that lifted me up to the next level of my life. So I met this person actually on Tinder, which is really funny because I am so not a dating app person, but in San Francisco, especially back in, that time, that's how everybody was meeting. And it was this instant connection. Like we knew each other. We even grew up in the same area. And this person, it felt like home. It felt so comfortable. And that's typically what the twin flame journey will feel like, is it will feel like, oh my gosh, I've known this person and I can be my full self and they see me and they love me and it feels so good. And it's amazing sexually and it's amazing physically. And it's usually all of these things that blast you off into this other universe where you sometimes become obsessed with each other and it's all you can think about. And it's almost codependent at times. That was my experience. And when I was with this person, there were moments where I was like, this is it. This is the person. This is what I've been looking for my entire life, right? And I know he felt that way too. And then we got into our arguments and our fights and our chaos. And this person brought out the ugliest sides of me. It was the sides of me that I actually didn't even know existed. There were so many parts of anger that came out and rage that came out. But to be honest, this was actually so beautiful because I had never experienced the extent of those emotions before. So he really was this mirror in showing me the entire spectrum of who I am. And I think that that's something that is so important that a lot of times we forget to actually acknowledge and to sit with and to feel all of these emotions of who we are. And so if there's a person who brings that out in you, rather than being like, you're toxic or blah, 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 or just writing them off, the goal and the mission here and what Saturn wants you to do is to look at, well, do I have this anger inside of me that hasn't been expressed? Do I have something that this person is triggering in me that instead of me just writing them off and being like, it's all you, that maybe there's something in me that I can look deeper at, that I can then heal from, that I can become better by knowing this, right? So that's what this person did for me. And we were on and off for a really long time. And it got to a point where at one time we got back together, and this was a period where I also knew that I was going to be leaving San Francisco. I was going to move to Los Angeles. And Saturn gave me a huge lesson because I actually got pregnant. And I share this, you know, it's a very intimate and vulnerable thing to share, but I wanted to share this with you guys because when we get pregnant, when we have something else that comes into the picture, it's not just about us anymore. And I had to get really serious about, is this the father of my child? Am I ready to have a baby right now? Am I ready for this? And the answer was no. And I remember the time that I found out that I was pregnant, it was September 11th, which was interesting. And I went to a psychic and she said, there's a baby in the room, but this baby is actually not going to stay. And in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What is she saying? And she was so on point because a few days later, I actually miscarried. And I felt that that was the most Saturnian experience that I could have had, where it gave me this glimpse of, hey, you need to get serious about who you're hanging out with. You need to get serious about what you're doing. You need to get serious about safe sex. You need to get serious about what are you surrounding yourself with? What is the pathway that you are putting yourself on right now? What are you doing? And that is what Saturn comes in and teaches us to do. And of course, all of the hormones that I experienced with, first of all, becoming pregnant is one of the most hormonal experiences you will ever have. And then having a miscarriage is extremely taxing on the body, on the hormones, on the emotions. And it also showed me the way that this person was able to show up and not show up. And it showed me that this person is not the father of my children. This person is not that for me. And I give you guys this very vulnerable share because it's so real what Saturn does. Saturn comes in and it tells us, who do you want to be? Are you ready for this? And get ready if not. And so that was really one of the most impactful pieces of that relationship journey during my Saturn return, is that it helped me to realize what I'm ready for and what I'm not ready for, and also to get very serious about who I'm giving my energy and my time to. That's something else with sex and with anything that is physical sexually with another person, is you need to remember and know you are always trading your energy. You are always giving yourself to someone and you are receiving their energy as well. So you need to be very cautious and careful with that. Another thing that was really important during this time was that I had a lot of friendships that I made and that then fell away. And these friendships also taught me a lot of really big lessons and showed me how much I used to look for validation outside of myself and how much I really put so many of these friends really high on a pedestal when they didn't need to be there. And I really cared about their opinions. I cared if I felt like I was judged. I cared about so many of these things. And Saturn showed me, you need to actually just put yourself first. You need to care about who you are and about the value that you bring to the world, and stop being obsessed with what other people think about you, or about receiving validation, or about getting compliments, or, you know, looking cool, or whatever the thing was. There's my Leo rising and Gemini moon coming in, you know? So Saturn is going to give you these deep lessons in all areas of your life. It is going to show you on a health point, a career point, a relationship point, a love point. Maybe you are buying a house, maybe you are having kids, maybe you are getting married, but it is the time that you are being set up for the rest of your life. So just to wrap everything up, I want to remind you that Saturn is here to help you to become more dedicated, to be more devoted, to have a very clear mission on who you are, and also to find yourself. It is the time of trying. It is the time that things are going to be tough. It is the time that things are going to ask you to work hard for what you want, but to also not be totally afraid of this time, because what it's going to do is it's going to give you these beautiful opportunities. Because I look back at that experience with my twin flame and I'm like, I'm so glad that I went through that. I'm so glad because I was able to learn who I am, what I want, and choose who I get to start a family and start a life with. And I'm so grateful for everything that it taught me in work, because all of those things are now skills that I use every single day today. It is giving you, it is essentially, you're in training. Saturn return is a time of deep training. It is training you emotionally to be a warrior. It is training you physically to take care of your body and to be stoic in your routines. It is teaching you to have structures for whatever it is that you do in your work. And it is teaching you to be sovereign in the way that you deal with yourself and in relationships. So I hope that you guys have gotten something out of this. The Saturn return is a time that can be very tough, but it also is a beautiful time because it's a coming of age. It is a time that you are essentially, blooming. And I remember, I'll leave you with this. I went to Bali with some friends when I was 29, so I was in the smack dab of my Saturn return. And we went and saw a Balinese healer named Dr. Rai. And Dr. Rai was working on everyone and prodding everybody with his little, tuning forks and sticks. And when he got to me, he said, "You have no problems." And he said, "But you are a flower that has not bloomed." And I will remember that to this day, because I remember during my Saturn return, I had not yet bloomed, but I'd say that I really started to bloom around 33. So it was kind of once I moved through that initiation of the Saturn return that then came into myself. So I hope that this resonates with you. Please leave a comment if you are in your Saturn return and let me know how's it's going. You can go to my website, lovenatalieholbrook.com, get a reading if you want to learn more. You can get a mini reading, which is a recording that I will send to you, or you can get one of my guides of your birth chart and how to go deeper into all of this work. Sending you guys so much love. Have an amazing day. And just know this too shall pass. You're on the right track. Be honest, be authentic, be in integrity, be responsible. Those are all of the things that Saturn wants to you, and he will reward you in the end. All right, goodbye.